So my app is the scripture memory app. And just the basic premise behind it is that users can come in and add or view verses that they're actively trying to memorize. So these are scripture verses. And when I say scripture, I'm referring to the Bible. So um, users can come in and add Bible verses that they're trying to actively memorize and continually review them. Um, the motivation behind this was I'm part of a Christian organization on campus that actively prioritizes scripture memory. Um, and the ways that we do it are kind of outdated. And um, in this digital world, it seemed like a good idea to create an app that helps us do that. So you can kind of see like another feature that the app also has is that they can collectively rank against other universities. And that's because this Christian organization is also present on other campuses. So it'd be good to see how other universities are progressing in their scripture memory and just be able to encourage each other in that. Um, so when I said that it's outdated, the ways that we use, you can see on the right hand side, um, there's just paper, like little strips of paper with the verses on it, and other people will write it on their bodies. But all of these are kind of outdated modes to do that, especially in this digital world where you can have an app that can do that for you. Um, yeah, so this is the class diagram for the application. The main view controller um, s- segments into other view controllers. So from there, you can get to the login view controller, which we'll see in a sec, is where you can enter your login information and verify your credentials. That way is one of the methods, just to see if you have the correct credentials to log in. The register view controller is for new users that are coming in. They enter all of their information, which universities they belong to. And here at this point, you can see one of the methods is check existing credentials, just to see if they have an account with us in the past. And from there, you can see a couple of the methods are in relation to choosing an image using our picker view. Um, yeah, so some of the methods are in relation to that. Um, yeah, and the main segment of view controllers is the verse table view controller and the verse detail view controller. So the table view controller has its obviously has a UI table view, and um, and from there you have the methods that are required for any table view, like number of row sections, self a row at, can an edit row at, and so on. You also have a prepare segue method um, that can segue into the competition view controller, the profile view controller, and even the detail view controller. Um, in the verse detail view controller, you can see that there's ideally three main things, three labels: the verse reference, the verse text, and then um, at the bottom, you'll see there is a UI segment and control, a mem segment. Um, yeah, so, and we'll see that in the view controller, and I kind of explain that once we get there. Also in the class diagram, you'll see there's two more. The competition view controller shows a map view, and on the map are plotted different universities. So at this point, we only have ASU and U of A. And just it will also, as a subtitle, show the number of verses memorized on that campus respectively. The profile view controller has the name, the university that the user belongs to, and their profile image, and the number of verses that they've memorized. And all of this information is sent via the um, prepare for segue method in the verse table view controller. And at the top, you'll see a couple models. So essentially there are two models, one for the user, which has their name, university, age, username, password, their profile image, number of verses that they've memorized. And it has two methods in it. The inc verses, which is incrementing verses, and decrementing verses is the second method, which is increments and decrements their verses memorized from their verse detail view controller. Um, yeah, and the user model has access to the core data operations like get records, save records, and so on for the user. And then the verse model has the reference, the text, the username of the user that saved that verse, just so when it populates, it's populating the verses for a specific user. It also has set memorized and get memorized, because those are the two things that are changing in the detail view as well. And the verse model Swift file for that has access to the core data for the verse data structure, get record, delete record, save record, clear data, and so on. All right, so this is the MVC diagram for the application. And um, so we start with the view, and the view pretty much controls the user interaction, and it responds to, um, or has the main screen, login screen, registration screen, the table view screen, and the detail view screen. Um, and it also inputs out that, or outputs out that the map view from the competition view controller. Um, some actions that the user can take from there is clicking the buttons, editing the table view cells, picking images, typing in the text fields for registration, and so on. Once the user does these actions, the controller um, gets the login, campus, and verse information that the user entered, calls the APIs that are necessary, and sends the information to the model, which stores the login and verse information to core data, and it stores user information, campus information, verse information, all in core data, and has different models for those users and verses like we looked at before. And once it's done that, once it updates user profile information and saves the API request information, it'll go ahead and notify the controller that that's been done, the addition and deletion of verses, the addition of profiles, whether certain users exist or certain verses exist in the core data already. Um, and then once it's done that, the controller will then update to the view, display any errors like the existence of an account when you're trying to recreate an account, or when certain verses are repopulated in the table view, um, and so on. So that's the general MVC diagram. So the next couple of slides are just screenshots of what the app looks like. So this is the landing page, welcome to Scripture Memory app, and then you'll have two options, one for login and one for sign up. So assuming you're a first-time user, you'll be taken to the register page where you can enter your information, name, university, age, username, password, and then you can select a picture. Either you can take a picture live from your camera, or you can choose one from your camera roll. And then you can go ahead and click the register. And at this point, it will check if an account already exists with that username. And if not, it'll go ahead and create an account. And once you do register, you'll be taken into the login page where you can enter the username and password that you just created and go ahead and click login. And at this point, you can, the system will go ahead and verify if that username and password match or exist and match. All right, so the next set of screenshots are regarding the table view and the detail view. So at this point, you can see a plus sign at the top of the table view, which is how you would add a verse. So once you go ahead and click the plus sign, you'll see a pop-up or an alert view pretty much, and um, that will prompt you to enter in a verse that you're looking to add. And then once you've entered that, it'll go ahead and make an API call and grab that verse for you and store all of the information regarding the verse. And from there, you can click on each of those individual verses that you have added, and you'll be taken to the detail view, which has the reference right across the top for the verse, the text of the verse right in the middle, and at the bottom you'll see a segmented controller for not memorized and memorized. That is just to keep track of your status on that specific verse. So if you've memorized it, you can go ahead and move it over to the memorized section, and it will also update in your verses memorized total that is being tracked for your profile and also across campuses. And at the bottom of the left screenshot, you'll see that there's two options: campus competition and profile. Um, and those are the ones that we'll discuss here. So when you click on the profile page, you can see that there's the profile image that you've selected, the university that you belong to, and the number of verses that you've memorized. And the number of verses that you memorize is the number of UI segmented controllers that you've moved to the memorized section in the detail view, and it keeps track of that. And you can also see on the right-hand side, the campus scripture memory competition, which was a campus competition button. You can see that there's only two universities that are preloaded in there right now, Arizona State and University of Arizona. And you can see that when you click on one of them, you'll be able to see as a subtitle the number of verses that are memorized in that specific university. So as the only user of Arizona State, you'll see that I have 3 verses memorized in there. And you can see that there's an option at the bottom, also UI segmented control, to select the map type from standard or satellite image. So some of the current limitations of the application is that it only supports 2 colleges, ASU and U of A. That was designed that way just for the limitations that we have. But as more colleges begin to use it, it's something that we could add. The the passwords and usernames are stored locally using core data instead of on the web using Firebase, which I see as a shortcoming because that way you would not be able to verify that someone else with that username or password is using it, because it's not stored on the web. Um, so you're limited when you store data locally. Um, Another limitation is with the API itself. This is kind of out of our control. It will sometimes return incorrect results when the user enters. Instead of providing an error, it will sometimes provide incorrect results for the API calls when the user enters something that's not correct. Another thing is that the detail view isn't set to handle longer verses. So if you were to throw in an entire chapter of the Bible or something along that line, or just a longer passage, the detail view does not allow for scrolling as of right now. So it wouldn't be able to handle the longer verses that are in there. Another limitation is that on the map view for the competition controller, it was initially meant to, once you were to click on a pin, there would be labels underneath the map that show the details, but right now it's set up as a subtitle because it just wasn't possible to have labels show up on the clicking of a pin. So it was just set up as a subtitle on the pin itself. Lessons learned through this would be um, one really interesting thing that I learned was how to transition to another view controller without using a segue. So normally we would use a button and then segue to that view controller. But I learned how to push a view controller um, from without using a segue. So um, for example, for the login page, if the credentials were correct, when the user pressed the button, there was a there was a couple options when the user pressed the button. They could either be prompted with an alert controller um, if some of their credentials were incorrect, or if it was correct, it could go to the new controller for the table view. And but we couldn't segue using that because we were using the button for some other purposes. So um, I learned how to push a view controller, and I did this on a couple occasions. So I learned how to push a view controller without actually using a segue. Another useful thing that was learned was to verify register and login credentials with usernames and passwords, which is pretty useful thing to know. Another thing was how to filter a core data response by certain parameters. So instead of just getting a large sum of data, I could filter based on a certain parameter or a certain field. Um, yeah, so and another thing was just to parse API responses in JSONs. The API response that I was getting from my API was in a different format than I'd seen before. So uh, I learned also how to parse interesting JSON structures with API responses. In terms of improvements for the project and the class, one thing that I could see improvement in is more of an emphasis on Firebase as a permanent data storage option. Most of the assignments were focused around core data and getting that correct. I can see the reason behind that, but I think just more practically, Firebase would be the best option to pursue. There was a little bit of trouble with using Xcode and just the UI for Xcode itself. It was kind of confusing at times, so maybe a tutorial on that would have been helpful. And one of the biggest struggles was just understanding optional variables and when to use them. It was just sometimes a mess of question marks, exclamation points, and just trying to figure out where to put some. So it might be good to review that. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the end of the slideshow. Thank you for coming.